maybe some housekeeping. Can I invite you to have a copy of the report, The Invisible Hand of Media Censorship in the Balkans, which is fresh. I think it was published something like yesterday. It's a report by the Balkan Free Initiative, and I read it yesterday. Interesting, very informative. Easier to read than the Commission reports, I must say. Okay. Now, hello everyone here and online. I'm very glad that after the COVID we can have hybrid events and you know, have a real panel like this one. My name is Giorgi Gotev. I have two hats. I'm a journalist in Brussels. I'm the senior editor of Euractiv, and in Bulgaria I'm the publisher of Euractiv Bulgaria, which means that there I'm a businessman and I have to take care of you know, having a team of journalists getting paid in time and things like that. It's my pleasure today to be a moderator, which is a different kind of job. A journalist usually is always, you know, critical and angry. A moderator is usually a nice guy, so I'll be a nice guy today. And
nice guy.
Yes, thank you for all of you who reacted. I had a tweet saying that I was attacked last Friday. I don't know if it is because of my work, but in any case, the person who attacked me took photos of me. I was bleeding, and maybe to report to someone. But in any case, the Belgian police has to investigate. My scars are not terrible, but there we are. I mean, let's see what the police is going to say. So we are going to discuss today media freedom in the Balkans with the examples of Bulgaria, Serbia, North Macedonia, three countries which are more than the Western Balkans. They are the Balkans because Bulgaria is the Eastern Balkans. In any case, Bulgaria is an EU member. Serbia is on its way to accession, and Macedonia, North Macedonia, not yet because of the Bulgarian veto. But the three countries have the same problems in terms of press freedom. I think that as Antoinette wrote an op-ed, the media situation has gone too far. I mean, it has deteriorated. It has gone too far. You can find her op-ed at Euractiv.com today. I'm pleased that Euractiv Bulgaria is the media partner of this event. We have a great panel. I will start, of course, with Antoinette, who is a colleague. She's a household name and face in Bulgaria. Everybody knows her because she appeared on television so many times. When she was kicked out from Nova Televizia, when she worked during at the time when the Domoshevi brothers were the owners, and you will read about the Domoshevi brothers in the report. I invited her the same day to join Euractiv Bulgaria, and I'm so glad that she accepted. But now she has another hat herself. She founded the Balkan Free Media Initiative, and she organized the work which produced this report. I will give you the floor, Antoinette, in a few moments. I will just mention that we have here as well Tamara Filipovic, who is representing the Independent Journalist Association of Serbia, NUMS, Nezavisno Udruženje novinara Serbia. She contributed to the Serbian part of the report. We have here Peter Whitehead from the Media Development Investment Fund, who came from London, from UK for this event. Naser Selmani is going to join us from Skopje, I believe. He's the former president of the Association of Journalists of Macedonia, maybe North Macedonia, I don't know. But anyway, he will join us online. We have Peter Horrocks. He's the board member of Offcom, the UK Commission regulator. And I should tell you that Peter Horrocks is also the former director of the BBC World Service. We have Andrea Bonnani with us, and maybe a lot of you have met him. He's the columnist of La Repubblica today, but he used to be the correspondent of La Repubblica, and before that it was Corriere della Sera, and this has lasted for 30 years or so. So, you know, the typical Brussels correspondent, you know, who never leaves Brussels, basically. I will also be extremely glad to give the floor to Radan Konev, member of the European Parliament, who is here with us. He represents Democrats for Strong Bulgaria. That's a small political force affiliated to EPP, but it is critical vis-a-vis the GERB party of Boyko Borisov. So, a great panel and short time. I will give something like 5 minutes for the panelists to make an initial statement, and then I hope that we will engage in a discussion. So without further ado, I give the floor to Antoinette Nikolova to present, first of all, the Balkan Free Media Initiative, but also the report. Antoinette, you have the floor.
Do I need a microphone? Is it okay like
yes,
that?
you need a microphone.
So why this report? The robust independent market relies on different interaction of different actors, state and non-state representatives. They should be lawmakers, owners, advertisers, suppliers, even the observers. All these actors are very important to determine media environment. However, several excellent media freedom organization documented the situation and the attack against journalists, a few medias in the Balkans. We think there's not enough attention paid to the techniques used by the politics and their allies into the market. So I mean, probably this is not the only case in the Balkans, probably also in the Western Europe, there's kind of an example like that, but not in this dramatic evidence, not so eloquent. We decided to focus, examine 3 countries, Bulgaria, member of the European Parliament, the European Union, member state country, which is, by the way, in the last position of the free media ranking. So as we had a little chat with Giorgi before, he noticed that actually Bulgaria deteriorated its situation after became member of the European Parliament.
Yeah, the European
That's
Union.
interesting why. So then we have Serbia in a process of negotiation. While we have their President Vučić with all his machine working for him. It's not necessary to be involved himself. And we have North Macedonia, which is a country who is aspiring right now to start negotiation. So that's why we focus on this country. There are 3 main techniques we discover are working in the Balkans, used by the politics, the owners, and I mean the players in the media market. One is the funding of the public broadcasters, and also the funding of the regulators who are supposed to be the guardian of the healthy media environment. Then we noticed that the ownership is in many cases supported by proxy of allies of the political leaders or political party. For example, in Bulgaria, there are politics who owns media. There are political parties that are running television. Something's pretty remarkable. The other thing we examined with the report is the financing of the media market, of the media outlets. It's pretty interesting to discover that a lot of European money and funds are actually going to the pro-government media. So these are the three techniques you will see into the report. And I would prefer to speak not so many on the cases, me personally, because we have here Tamara, we have Naser, then we have Radan to speak about Bulgaria, the member of the European Parliament, and Giorgi, who is a publisher, who is, by the way, is an excellent example how an independent publisher, who is not depending on the local situation, could provide a good independent information.
Well, in any case, I created Euractiv Bulgaria as a legal entity in Belgium to be on the safe side, and you know, at least I will not have tax checks and you know, all kinds of hassle every day, as some media have. But so I prefer to pay Belgian taxes rather than 10% Bulgarian flat tax.
So Giorgi, maybe there is the American Radio Free Europe, who is pretty independent.
I was inspired by Radio Free Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Radio Free Europe, they have a network, and we also have a network. Yeah, the Euractiv network.
But Euractiv is focused on the European values and the European topics. So
exactly.
Radio Free Europe is more American, let's say. And then there is another interesting case in Bulgaria, another media outlet who is based abroad, finance with donation and I mean independent sources to survive. Actually, the three media in Bulgaria that are kind of independent. You should rely on their information.
There are media that are okay. I mean, we have as media partners, Euractiv Bulgaria has as media partners Sega Daily, which is a very decent mainstream media. Absolutely. And our other partner is Dnevnik, which also is a very respected media. But few people read, you know, those media because they prefer, you know, the tabloids and, you know, our newspapers are too serious.
The tabloids reading is a global problem.
Yeah.
Now we focus mostly. I would like to say a few words because probably some of you are asking what are people from the Western Europe doing in this Balkan Free Media Initiative. Actually, the idea was born last year. I was helping Western colleagues to cover the big protest in Bulgaria against 10 years lasting Boyko Borisov, then Prime Minister government. And I think how important was for our local colleagues to have support and to get attention from the international media. But, you know, in our job, when something else, someone else occur, then the international media attention is just switched to the other part, and the local journalists are just alone. So that's why we decided with my prestigious friends and colleagues to create this initiative and to have guarantee a constant monitoring of the situation and pay attention and knock the doors to the doors where people we know, institution or just colleagues in international media. We had at the beginning a founder, a former ambassador, a peace negotiator, James Pardew, who sadly passed away. But as a result of this our intention. We produced this report, and I would like to say thank you to the few people who were helping us to collect the information from Bulgaria, from North Macedonia, from Serbia. And so probably I got my 5 minutes.
Yep. But I will have to jump in and read an address we just received from the President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli, for our event. It's pretty long. I'm going to read a few sentences from his address, and I think that the full text will be published with your website. So President Sassoli is saying the following: in addressing you greeting and best wishes, I want to strongly reaffirm a fundamental principle. Democracy is not conquered once and for all. Without a free press capable to exercise the right of criticism, control over how power is exercised at all levels, democracy is not complete. The fundamental values of the European Union cannot be subject to any derogation. I think he was thinking a little bit also about Poland there. Faced with the worsening of our freedoms, we must make our voice heard stronger than we have done. We must do this before being free means knowing, and our knowledge is true only when information is free, says David Sassoli. Okay, now, you know, if you read you have probably started reading the report, you will notice that it starts with another address from Harlan Mandel, the CEO of Media Development Investment Fund, which is a very interesting organization which is funding free media. But I think more importantly, we have among us a representative of this organization, and this is Peter Whitehead. So I would like to give him the floor.
Just checking it's working. Yep. Great. Hi, my name is Peter Whitehead. As Giorgi said, I work for Media Development Investment Fund. It's a very financial investment sounding organization, but I should say we're a not-for-profit. So we're originally based in the our headquarters now is in the US, in New York. So we're registered as a public charity, not-for-profit organization. So we conduct our affairs and we work with independent media companies on a very commercial basis, but we don't have our own shareholders to pay dividends to. So we were founded in the region. Our first office was in Prague by a Serbian journalist and media manager who ran Radio B92 in the early Milosevic years. So this is the mid-90s we were founded. And the original idea was to provide loan financing and technical assistance, by which I mean media management support. So lots of journalists know how to be journalists, but they don't have the organizations don't have the media management knowledge to generate their own incomes and increase their revenues. And by this, they can obviously, or at least from our point of view, obviously improve their independence, their editorial independence. So editorial independence being dependent to some extent on, or to a large extent in many cases, on financial independence. So we originally founded to try and help media organizations transitioning from former communist regimes to adapt to the market, you know, the free market world, the capitalist market world that they were moving into. But we quite quickly realized that actually that problem isn't limited to Europe, you know, across the whole world, across Indonesia, coming out of dictatorships, Central America, South America, Africa. So we extended our operations and now cover more than 40 countries. But Europe is still an absolute focus of our work. And with media capture, what we have been seeing across so many countries in the region, so the 3 countries in the report, but also in many other Central and Eastern European countries, from Hungary to Poland, Slovakia. It's not limited to these 3 countries, though these 3 countries are great examples of what is going on. So we've seen in all of these locations the incidence of well, the classic steps, if you like, of media capture taking place. So regulators being corrupted and controlled by the state, public broadcasters being captured by the state, soft censorship, by which I mean the allocation of state funding or EU funding in some cases to friends of the to media that are friendly towards the authorities, and taken away, deprived from others, from more independent voices. And just from these few words, I think you can possibly see that our approach is more on the micro level. So we're obviously the macro level about these regulators and public broadcasters are phenomenally important, but we tackle it on or try to tackle it on an individual media organization, media company level. So so what we are trying to do is providing equity financing. We also provide a lot of loan financing to help media generally, but specifically when capture is at stake, is at issue, we can provide equity financing to stop or to try and prevent media being taken over by oligarchs, by business allies, by political parties. So if we can work with an individual media company, individual media organization that needs equity capital, or where some capital is being, where some shareholding is being sold, if we can partner with them to buy that capital, we see it as an investment as well from our point of view. Say we don't have shareholders, but we see it as being part of a sustainable business. We see there's a good business plan, it's a good business, it has a good independent voice. Our interest is in trying to support that organization. And if we can do that by providing equity, and then also by providing some technical assistance, if they need it, they may not need it, then that is our that's our approach. So just finally, our task at this moment, when we see the deterioration in media freedoms across so many countries in Europe, is to try and mobilize like-minded capital. So other financing like ours that sees the value of independent media, and to try and bring it to the benefit of individual media organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. So from micro level, we move to macro level, because regulators are important, and from the report we can see that regulators are quite problematic in the three countries which are at the attention of the report. I would like to invite now the other Peter Horrocks, a board member of Offcom, to give his perspective, and possibly also with some hints how can the situation be improved. Peter Horrocks, you have the floor.
Giorgi, thank you very much, and thank you everyone who's here and who's attending online. I thought I might start with a little bit of historical context, and I have a confession. I've probably closed down more journalism in Eastern Europe than even the most ambitious authoritarian. And that's because, as director of the BBC World Service some years ago, I was responsible for closing a number of services for countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, and Serbia.
You shouldn't.
But that was, of course, they were bittersweet decisions, because it was sad to lose journalistic teams. But the reason that the British broadcasting decided to do that was because of the growth of media freedom and media standards in that part of Europe. And I asked myself this afternoon, what has gone wrong that's meant that the hope that we had, that instead of outsiders providing journalistic services, instead we moved to capacity building, doing the kinds of things through training that Peter's talked about, that MDIF supports so well. And I think that the leaders that we now have in these countries have learned how to have almost as great a degree of media control as the old style communist authoritarians, but in much more subtle and clever ways. And this report brilliantly brings to life the techniques that are being used. And they're fundamentally techniques of political persuasion, coercion, and the use of commercial power, both as carrots and as sticks. And there are some great examples, I'm sure we'll hear of them. But for instance, the use of publicly funded advertising as an incentive for publishers and broadcasters to stay on side, or more direct use of financial muscle. And the report gives a very clear example of the way that in Serbia, the state telecom company, Telekom Serbia, is using its financial power directly, deliberately, and admittedly to be able to drive out independent media organizations from that country, to enable leaders to be able to, as I say, exert the kind of persuasion and control over their populations that was similar to communist times. So what can the international community, in particular, what can the European Union, the Commission, parliamentarians represented here, potentially do about it? Well, some of that, of course, is just to draw attention to it, to call out the bad practice and to encourage good practice. And that's what this report is doing. And we would ask all parts of the EU institutions to get behind that. But why should they do that, and why should it matter? Well, I hope that most people who are here in Brussels would understand the values that the European Union has been based on, values of respect for human rights and individual liberties. But even if you're not so persuaded of those, the advantage of free media in terms of underpinning political accountability and economic well-being is well attested to throughout the world. So if you're not so convinced by the moral case, the pragmatic case for supporting the importance of independent media is clear. So beyond researching it and, as I say, calling it out, what can be done? Well, all the different aspects of EU compulsion, I think, should be available. So as an example, where such media owners abuse EU competition law, whether within the European Union or in doing things outside the European Union that then impact in terms of the use of state aid, for instance, that should be dealt with. And this comes to the point about regulation, where regulators in these countries are not adopting appropriate EU standards in terms of the appointments to independent or supposedly independent regulation of media, or infringements of EU requirements. For instance, the example that Antoinette gave of political parties in Bulgaria actually having captured TV stations that respond to their agenda. And then there's the use of EU funding. It's important that EU funding is not used inappropriately. And I think in this context, it's highly surprising, to put it at its lowest, that the EU is still funding Euronews with a proud tradition in terms of promoting EU values and rights across the European Union, but is now almost wholly privately owned and has created subsidiary channels in Serbia and Bulgaria, which have done commercial deals with state entities. And then the use of EU funding to support independent journalists, support organizations that promote and celebrate and train independent journalism. I would suggest that the EU should look at all of the different dimensions of its policies, whether competition, regulation, funding, and put in place comprehensive programs to incentivize good behaviors and disincentivize bad behaviors. And I hope that today's report can play a critical role in achieving a real shift in the EU's focus on these important issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter Horrocks. You are calling on the EU institutions, but are they listening? This is the question I'm going to ask to the next speaker, Andrea Bonnani, who has been a long time in Brussels, and I think that that would be an educated guess. Andrea, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And as a correspondent, I've been stealing documents commission documents for my lab. So I stole the report some time before the publication, and I've read it, and I say it's very well done and very alarming. But as we all journalists say, it's no news. I mean, unfortunately, since the dawn of time, control of the media has been the mother of all power games. We don't need to quote the Bible or Iliad, or we don't need to quote Demosthenes or Cicero, which has been killed by their enemies in a time when the idea of control of the media was a little more brutal than now. But the problem is, with time, media have evolved, and so has evolved also the means and the way to control them. When Antoinette asked me to join this initiative, I was glad to accept, because I still have very strong in me the memory as an old journalist of how my country switched its popular culture, its fundamental values, its political orientation, due to the very subtle manipulation of a media mogul. For 10 years, Mr. Berlusconi, as you know, has been in control not only of the 3 main private TV channels, also of the public broadcaster RAI and some newspaper. And no public administration has been able to check this power. There has been at least 3 different laws on media ownership, which has been approved in Parliament and went disattended. So the damage was huge. And since then, the politics in my country has been deteriorating. And that brings us to the very slippery issue of the distinction between media freedom and media quality. Bad quality of media is also an insult to media freedom, but we will go too far from that.
No,
Anyway,
actually, I would
yeah.
like to ask you to go deeper into that.
No,
Because the contamination of the Berlusconi style
a very long,
in Eastern Europe has been terrible. I mean,
I know,
our media have
but in
become
Italy as well.
infotainment.
And the proof is that even when Berlusconi was forced to resign in order to avoid the bankruptcy of Italy, politics has kept declining and deteriorating in my countries. And the political narrative has been monopolized by populists after Berlusconi, by populist organizations, populist parties, which were nurtured in this subculture, which was spread by Berlusconi media in the Berlusconi era. So we are still paying the price to that moment. And I think now, after the pandemics, things started changing for better. And the proof is the nomination of Mr. Draghi as a president with such a large majority in the parliament. But this too long introduction is just to say how media freedom and on the other hand, media manipulation is so fundamental, especially for countries which are still struggling to achieve a mature democracy. Mr. Sassoli, which has been so kind to send us his endorsements, in a recent interview quoted the German jurist and philosopher Wolfgang Birkenford, and especially his well-known paradox. I quote because it is need to be quoted. The liberal secular state lives on premises that it itself cannot guarantee. That is the point. That is the point, the very core of the issue. And of course, freedom of the media is one, if not the most important of these premises. Well, in my opinion, the time has come now to prove that Birkenford paradoxes can be solved. In my opinion, the European Union, with help of civil society, has a duty to help Western Balkans to grow a mature and free media environment. How can we do that? Not with coercion, of course, because coercion would prove Birkenford the paradox right, because it's contradicting the principle of a liberal state, not with the stick, but with the carrot of access negotiation, as my colleague from BBC said, also is possible by financial aid, but financial aid well aimed and well directed. No country, in my opinion, and that is the principle, deprived of a free media environment, should join the EU. We already witnessed in Poland and Hungary and other Eastern European countries the dire consequences of a democratic involution. And we have seen how media manipulation is instrumental to this end. This lesson, in my opinion, must be learned. Effective media freedom must be a precondition for acceding our European family if we want, as Peter said, that this family keep prosperous, free, and mature.
Okay, very strong message. I mean, as a journalist, I took note, and I will repeat, no country deprived of media freedom should join the EU. The message is clear. Now, we are going to go into the three countries one by one. I just want to say that in my perspective, things in Bulgaria are starting to change and to improve. Boyko Borisov is no longer on power. There is no fear in society, and slowly, I think things are changing. In North Macedonia, it's a little bit different because the darkest period was the time when VMRO DPMNE was on power with Mr. Gruevski, who escaped to Hungary, hidden in the trunk of a Hungarian diplomatic car. But in any case, they may return, and that would be bad. I'm not optimistic about Serbia because Mr. Vučić looks he looks very strong, and he controls everything. You know, Telecom Serbia was mentioned as Vučić's weapon to stifle media freedom. Euractiv, we wrote an article about it, and many others. But he seems invincible. And before him, Borisov in Bulgaria, he conveyed the message that there is no alternative to them. If it's not them, it will be worse. This is what they used to tell Mrs. Merkel and others and so on. So let's take one country after the other, and let's try to make sense of it. Let's start with Tamara Filipovic, and let's start with Serbia. Tamara contributed to the report. I leave it to you whether to go into the report or to speak more, I would say, in a more relaxed way about, you know, this difficult situation. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I have to just correct it. It is not my report. I was not an author of this report. It was my colleague, but I went through the report very briefly, and I will actually tell you something about the media market and how we in the Independent Journalists Association see it, because now we are in process of changing the media laws. The first law which will be changed, it is a law on media and public information. And there are some problems which we mentioned in the media strategy and action plan, and it is also regarding the media market. And the biggest problem actually regarding media market is that there is no media market in Serbia, real media market. Why it is like that? So because of the huge interference of the state in media market. As Antoinette said, there is a couple of ways how they are interference in the media market. It is through the public advertising, which is not all media are not capable, but they're discriminated in the access of the public advertising. And the biggest problem is that the institutions and public enterprises do not want to declare how much money they are spending to the advertising in the media. In 2014, we adopted in that time new media laws, and one of the goals of the previous media strategy and in this media strategy is also the privatization of the media, withdrawal of the state from the ownership of the media. In that time, we had something about 80 media which are state controlled and owned by the state. Some of them are privatized and some of them are not. Still, we have, for example, daily Politica, which is partly state-owned. News agency Tanjug, it was closed or should be closed by the decision of the government in 2015.
It's losing money, but it's never.
Yeah, but it is not never happened. Yeah. The privatization of Tanjug happens actually this year, finally. And also Večernje Novosti, it is all daily, which was also privatized before a couple of months. And how we privatized media in 2014 and 15. We introduced a new model of financing of the media. It is called the co-financing of media project in public interest. So the state should and are giving the money to the media which are compete on the public call for proposals. And it is imagined that actually the best media projects should get the money from the state or at the local level. But what's happened actually? We call this privatization, partisan privatization, because media, which was state-owned, was bought by some proxies very close to the government ruling party. And after that, they got that money which they gave for the media on the public calls. So it was really misuse of the law. The laws, when we adopted the laws, all laws were in Brussels for checking and everything was in line with the EU standards and laws, but we managed to misuse all laws in the really bad manner. So the implementation of the laws is the biggest problem in Serbia. This fragmented media market also. We have in Serbia 2,600 media outlets. In 2040, it was 1,500. Now it's 1,000 more. And the value of the media market is about 200,000 euro per year. And the intervention of the state is more than that. So you see how huge is that intervention of the state, and what is at the end, what's happened with the information and pluralism of media content. There is no pluralism of the media content. We have so many media outlets, but there is no pluralism of the media content because most of the media are state controlled. There is 5 TV with national frequency. All of them, including the public broadcaster, is under the control of the government. And if you have in mind that in Serbia, still more than 70% of the public is informed through the TV, you can imagine what kind of information they are getting from those kind of media. The independent media is, there is a couple of tens in the whole Serbia. When we are talking about the independent media, that is 1 or 2 cable TV stations, 3 or 4 weeklies, 2 print dailies, and we have very strong scene regarding the independent investigative portals. So that is a good thing regarding the content. And having in mind, I just talked before with Peter about that research. It's called the illiberal turn. What is the worst? What when it comes to that media, the deficient of media, pluralism of media content, that majority of the people who in Serbia who are watching, for example, public broadcaster, just 45% they are caring about the democracy in Serbia. 56% of people, they don't care if they're authoritarian regime or something else. So that is the final result of this media market in Serbia, or no media market.
Let me ask you.
Yep.
Twitter has tagged what Twitter considered to be the friendly media to the government. They put a tag "Mediji koji sarađuje sa vladom Serbia," and I think they did it. They did it quite well. I mean, I think that the choice of the media was obvious. We have a story here with Euractiv. Serbian president fumes as Twitter exposes his friendly media. Do you think they did it well, and do you think this had an impact?
The tabloid media, they were furious about this ticket from the Twitter. I would say that maybe Twitter should be more transparent and to give the criteria how they are labeling the media. That is my personal opinion, but they did it well. Actually, if they read the reports from national and international organization, and they could find the proofs why they give that label. But
yeah,
in my opinion, they should.
Yes, I'm not the spokesperson of Twitter, but if you go on their website, you will find. I mean, Twitter says, among other things, that state-financed media like the BBC, with editorial independence, they are not defined as state-affiliated for the purpose of this policy. So they basically explain why. Okay, but we'll return to this during the discussion, I'm sure. Next on my list is Naser Selmani, former president of the Association of Journalists of Macedonia. I think this will be online from Skopje. Do we have the connection? Naser, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you. Hello guys. First, thank you for having me, and congratulations for this important event. I will try to shortly to give a. Oh, it's not possible. I prepared some presentation, but I will try to explain or to give some kind of context of Macedonian media environment. Why it's important to go back and to see what's happening in the last 30 years. First, I want to emphasize that communism didn't collapse in North Macedonia in 1991. There was some kind of continuation. Communists transformed as social democrats, governed the country since 1998. They achieved communist ideology to replace with extreme nationalism and very widely corruption in the country. During this period of time, they achieved to privatize 90% of state-owned properties. People close to the establishment through the night became a millionaire. Exactly these people established the first private broadcast media in North Macedonia, of course, serving to the state establishment. Who owns Macedonian media? I will give you just example of main national TV channel, TV Citel, which is the biggest TV national TV channel, was established by a politician and a businessman, Ljubislav Ivanov Dzingo, which in that time was the leader of Socialist Party. This guy, during the socialist era, was all the time MP in the parliament. He continued to be MP also in a democracy after 1991. He achieved to privatize company Silex for production and processing non-metals, but in meantime he formed a dozen companies. I can say he and his family own companies from all kinds of businesses which you can imagine in North Macedonia. Interestingly, he was close friend of Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic. He was very close with him, and all the time when Milosevic was in power in Serbia, he had all the time he was in contact with him. The same profile of other owner of the bigger TV channels have in North Macedonia. Let's say the owner of Channel 5, which is also a leader of a small marginal political party and also a businessman. It's interesting that they have no ideological restraints. They serve as a propaganda machine to all government, and they all the time they are with the government and serve to, and in some way they give the services of the TV channels to protect themselves and businesses of course. How the government control mainstream media. You know, Macedonian media market is oversaturated. More than 60 national, regional, and local broadcaster operates within just 39 million euro market, media market. Of course, you can imagine that there is need for fresh money in media, and the government appears as a savior of media, spending public money in non-transparent way and aiming to control media. I will give just some numbers. For example, the previous government of Gruevski, for 11 years in power, how he spent 38 million euros. What's changed? The new government for 3 years spent around 8 million euros. I think the amount is bigger, but we have problem to receive because the government is not transparent, and it's hard to receive information from the different government entities how much money they spend on media. The aim of the government is not to help media to be more professional and to well informing of the people, but it's obvious to control their editorial policy and to prevent criticism in media. Someone maybe will ask if there is any changes compared with the period of Gruevski. Yes, maybe just cosmetic changes. If Gruevski spent public money on media through government advertising, Zaev is doing through political advertising. It's just changed the way how the money goes to media. One very strong instrument to control and to discipline media is policy of impunity. in last 10 years, AGM, Association of Journalists of Macedonia, where I spent 8 years, have registered around 50 verbal and physical attacks against journalists. Less than 10% of these cases are fully investigated, and people who attacked journalists are punished. There is a long and ineffective investigation. There is a clear game between police, public prosecutor, and judges. I will tell you just one example. I was involved. For example, I need to spend 5 hours in the police station to report intimidation by some guys from urban mafia in Skopje. The aim of police is just to demotivate journalists to report this kind of attacks. There is clear tendency to protect attackers of journalists. When I talked with the Minister of Interior Affairs, why they are not able to clarify and to solve all cases of violence against journalists, he said, you know, during the time of Zgorevsky, there was a not well investigation, and it's harder to continue and to finish investigation. And I said, okay, if the police officers did a wrong investigation, then you launch a procedure against this kind of these guys in the police. And he said he started to laugh. Now in Macedonia, it's government is playing a new game. They are wanting to show some kind of activism that they will solve this kind of policy of impunity through changing of penal code, which is, for me, it's a clear attempt of defocusing of the story, because in Macedonia, North Macedonia, we don't have problem with the lack of legislation, we have problem of implementation of laws. And finally, all governments during the 30 years kept a PBS in bad condition through partization of managing boards and without letting them without money. All the time in debts. Can you imagine Macedonian national PBS have debts from the communist era? They are not able to pay them because all the time they grow through the years. The new government, we expected that new government will start the reform of PBS. The legislation is brought by consultation with journalists, journalist association, and media experts, but they refused. Now it's 4 years. They refused to implement in 2 crucial parts: appointment of the new people in managing board of PBS and allocating enough money for financing of PBS. Instead, PBS to receive around 30 million euros per year, they give just half of this amount. The idea is to keep in low profile PBS and the government to play with private TV channels, which of course control them. And
we lost you, Naser. Yeah, I would like to ask Naser a question when he will be back. It's regarding it's an issue which you can find a little bit in the report. It's the interest of Viktor Orban in the media in North Macedonia. I would like to hear from him, but maybe later. Okay, now we come to Bulgaria, and my speaker will be the member of the European Parliament, Radan Kanev, whom I will invite to take this podium. What I can say is that Radan Kanev represents a political force which was among those that protested against the government of Boyko Borisov and against the chief prosecutor, who is still in place. Yes, and It's interesting that Boyko Borisov is EPP affiliated, and the political force Lankanov represents is also EPP affiliated. And so are, by the way, the parties of Mr. Vucic and of Mr. Borisov, and in the case of North Macedonia, the darkest period of North Macedonia, of Mr. Gruevski. I don't know, happens like this. But Mr. Kenneth, you have the floor.
Thank you. And being not part of the team that prepared the report, I will not go deep into the facts in the report about Bulgaria. Everybody can, of course, read it, but I will go straight to the most painful question, the one of Peter. How could it be that after the accession of the European Union, Bulgarian media became clearly less free, more biased, and exactly now, in the midst of the fourth COVID wave, I will point very much out much more susceptible to toxic propaganda than before we acceded the Union. And I will ask the same question in an even more painful way. And it is, how could it be that in the last years of the communist regime, at least part of the media and many journalists tried to be much more objective than they are now, when they are part of the European media market? And I will give an answer that I know pretty well is partial. It's only part of the answer, but a part that is rarely thought of, and I consider very important. You know, media has seldom been really free, historically. From the time when the Pharaoh Ramses II proclaimed throughout his old country on all the big temples his great victory over the Hittite army, and only like more than 3,000 years later, through the archaeology, we understood that he never won that war. And he signed a very humiliating peace treaty with the king of Hatti. So it's the first very strong evidence we have on media control and censorship. But coming back to Bulgaria, ever since Ottoman times, we really rarely and seldom had free media. We know that the communist regime officially didn't allow that. What we speak less often is that during the time of relative democracy we had at the end of the 19th and beginning of 20th century, media was also not really free. One of the biggest debates during the adoption of the first Bulgarian constitution was the debate on legal censorship. And the government over then insisted very much on it. Anyway, the Bulgarian constitution adopted the principle of free media, but did the governments in Bulgaria really observe it? Not. And here is the main point of my 5 minutes. The stronger a Bulgarian government has been during the years, the more it succeeded in different periods to impose limitations to media freedom. And what some of us remember as relative freedom in the last years of the communist regime was nothing more than a sign of the utter decline and degradation of political power over them. No one in government wanted more free media. They just hadn't the instruments to sustain the censorship anymore that they had before. And on the other hand, a European government is always a strong government. It has a lot of money in its pocket. And as we clearly saw in the last years, it has always powerful allies somewhere in the European parties and institutions. As Giorgi said, I had a huge struggle in the European People's Party last year to push the party to acknowledge obvious facts. And it was really unsuccessful. Yes, we convinced some colleagues, 23 of our colleagues, to at least partially admit the truth, but the truth that was obvious. And furthermore, a European government always has certain leverage to build alliances to be interesting for strong stakeholders outside the European Union. In Bulgarian case, it's very clearly Ankara and Kremlin, and in the Hungarian, for example, it's Kremlin and Beijing. What I'm saying this for is to warn that I will argue with Giorgi here. I'm far from optimist that the end of Borisov's reign in Bulgaria is necessarily the end of media censorship. Yes, now we see a period that in the Cold War era we would call the detente, because media owners don't know who comes next in power. But I think that it's simply due to a situation that with co-interregnum. We don't have strong power in Bulgaria now. And I'm very much afraid that once we have a stable government again, as happened in the Republic of North Macedonia, many things will very easily become the same. If I should conclude by using once again and by purpose the Cold War terminology, I think what we need from the European Union is a straight policy of containment towards Eastern Europe governments when it comes to media. I think we should definitely get rid of including the possibility of media funding in the European programs, because then it goes through government, through local authorities, and practically all the examples are detrimental. If we need to have some options of funding of media projects with European money, it should necessarily be direct financing by the Commission. And I would say it should include clear evidence that the media is not pro-government biased. Because what happens with European money in Eastern Europe is really damaging, even destroying the media market. I would even say, and with this I would finish this short statement, that if we impose only half the standards that led to the resignation of Mr. Kurz in Austria, then we'll have no candidate for Prime Minister of Bulgaria.
Thank you, Radan Kanev, well-deserved applause, and please disagree with me, everyone. I mean, I'm happy with that. Let's have a lively discussion, and we have time for that. I will disagree a little bit with you that the Commission will be able to channel the funding. I think the funding that the EU has for all its member states and for all the countries of the Western Balkans should be funded via well-recognized international NGOs. As simple as that. It's not difficult to do. Okay, I have received one request for the floor, and I'm extremely happy to give the floor to Atanas Chobanov, who is a well-known Bulgarian investigative journalist. He recently created Bird BG, which is a investigative website which makes big headlines every day. I must say that despite the difficult situation of the Bulgarian media, Bulgaria has a strong investigative journalism, and indeed my colleague Chobanov is one of these guys who are doing a great job. Do you have a microphone? Okay. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Giorgi. I'll speak from here. In Russia, they have even better investigative journalists because the situation is worse. So there is a correlation, apparently. I wanted to say a couple of words about the financing of media. Radan Kanev was very precise that the European money are corrupting the media landscape in Bulgaria. And it's for years now, and for years we're claiming, we're shouting that the Commission stop this money, that they go to pro-government media, but it's not only European money. We have government funding, we have municipality funding friendly media locally. That's why regional media in Bulgaria are almost dead. And what we succeeded with pressure from the civil society and some legislators is to put a registry in the Ministry of the Culture on media funding. It started recently, and what we did, like investigative journalists, we are working with big data. We connected this registry with other registries like corporate registry, like public procurements, like any kind of European funds. So I don't know if it's possible to show at the website, but the link I gave you before. The idea is that when you search for a company, you can scroll down. When you can search the media by name, by letter, and so on. Click on A, for example. So you see immediate site. Can't be much what's going on. No internet or something's happening. Okay, the idea is that you see the media, you see the funding organization, you see how much they got from this organization. You can go to and you can see about the owners of this media, if they have other business not connected to media, which is important. If they got other funds from European funds or from public procurements, and you can have a pretty good idea about how connected to the public funds this media is. And I think this is very helpful to implement also for media having public funding in other countries. That's our way to explore this network of dependencies, of intertwinement between state actors and media. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, Tanas. You have so many interesting stories, but I think that we will also have time after we will finish to chat informally. I would like now to open the floor for questions, and I also invite the panelists to argue among themselves. In any case, I admit that I'm maybe too optimistic regarding Bulgaria, and I can very well imagine that once we will have an established government, things can go back in the old way, because this is something that has been working so well for so many years. So why change it? Yes. So let's start the discussion from this point. Can we be optimistic? You have the floor. And can you introduce yourself? And if you have a question, please say to whom is it addressed?
I think it will be kind of transversal.
Okay, mobile microphone.
Yeah, okay. Hello, I'm Venerin Gotev. I'm a PhD researcher at ULB, the Free University of Brussels. And my question, I will divide it into, let's say, 3 sub-questions. So firstly, I see that we all have a lot of, congratulations on the report. I very much look forward to hearing it, and also excellent discussion so far. So I wanted to ask, so we speak about external intervention and the EU in a very hopeful manner, which is of course extremely good. But as, for example, the quote you gave us, it shows us that liberal democracy in the end, it will always kind of remain challenged, and it will always be challenged sooner rather than later. And in this case, what I think is we cannot expect, I think that, for example, that the EU, can we really expect that the EU is really like, let's say, EU enlargement or whatever other type of process we have is kind of like, I don't know if you know this MTV show where you basically are a bit, well, let's say your hair is not so good or your makeup is not so good, so we fix you up and then you become excellent and you will live happily ever after. can we really expect that external intervention will work in that way? And isn't it more feasible to really just accept the fact that and especially once we have all this Euro funding, all this public funding, then in the end, it has kind of there is always the potential for this to be misused, and always, no matter how complex our regulation is, I can still be let's say there is still the accord between, let's say, the political force and, let's say, me as the media owner who's running the business, and for one or another reasons, as questionable as they can be, I can go, let's say, to the dark side, let's say, of the force. And in this context, I think I think this discussion is not only pertinent only to Central and Eastern Europe, only to the Balkans. And I think we said, for example, that we should not accept any country that does not respect these standards. But I think, okay, we saw that, for example, what happened in Austria. There are countries that sooner or later, in a lot of countries, this will be disrespected or in one another way. And here I really am very glad that we have investigative journalists here. Isn't it more this that should be the fundamental stress of this, really, to show through the force of the better arguments that via investigation, isn't that how we defend really democracy, and really thinking of how to make this good standard that could help us protect media freedom?
No, thank you. I think you can receive as many answers as we have speakers. My perspective is that investigative journalism, as Atanas said, sometimes is better developed in more authoritarian countries. I'm not aware of great investigative journalism here in Belgium, for example, which is a shame, by the way. But Andrea, of course.
You made a case in point. If there were no free press in Austria, investigative journalists would have been useless. So we are witnessing a political change in Austria. We have been witnessing one when the extreme right fell after an investigation against Strache, and now we are seeing Kurz resigning after. So the problem is not investigative journalists. The problem is the freedom of the press to give the floor to investigative journalists. We can have very good investigative journalists, but if they don't have an audience, if they don't have a floor to show what they found out, that is useless. As far as the question, which is very interesting, who is going to impose freedom of the press? No one is going to impose freedom of the press, because if we would impose freedom of the press, we wouldn't be a liberal. But we can fix standard. The European Union, all along its life, since '57, has been working imposing standards. Now, first were economic standards. I remember when Italy was compelled to create an independent national bank. The national bank was not independent. They said, if you want to stay here, you have to have an independent international bank, national bank. So now standards are more, in my opinion, more connected to values. Freedom of the press is, as we have seen, one of the fundamental values. So you say you want to enter the European Union, you have to have a free press and media environment. That is a standard. You are not obliged to enter. In the same way, you're not obliged to stay in the European Union if you want to.
Andrea, we heard your message is very clear. Yeah. No media freedom, no joining the EU, but Bulgaria is already there. Okay. Peter Horrocks has a train to catch, is that correct? Yes. Peter, do you want to say something? Okay, so I will give the floor now to my colleague from EU reporter, Catherine. You have the floor.
Since you're in Offcom, can you tell something about, you said that the European Commission should look at the competition rules, and this gentleman has said that they should look at standards, but there are standards, there are competition guidelines on what is required of if you're going to give state aid to public media. We see billions of zloty being spent on, for example, the Polish state broadcaster, which is essentially now a propaganda mouthpiece of the government. And so you seem to be hopeful about what the EU can do in this area. I mean, I've asked questions in the press rooms about it on multiple occasions. Commissioner Vestager, I've got nothing decent in the way of a response. So from an Offcom perspective, as a regulator, how, why is there this reluctance? I can see the difficulty of regulating this particularly sensitive sector, because even in the UK, people will say, well, the BBC is biased one way or the other. You can point to bias in every country. It doesn't have to be the worst, doesn't have to be Bulgaria or Poland. So the regulator seems to be reluctant to regulate. So, I mean, I'm just wondering what do they need to do to justify their intervention?
No, I think you make some really good points. And that's why I talked about the range of interventions that might be needed, whether it's about the economic regulation, whether it's about the quality of media regulation, or indeed the funding. I think it's one of those examples where, because it exists across a variety of EU competencies and responsibilities, that's why having an overall view of it is really important. And as you imply, it comes down to a matter of political will in terms of the importance that's attached to it. I think we can see from what we've been hearing, what we can read in the report, and what we've been hearing this afternoon, that it really does matter, and it's about those coordinated things. Of course, there are always going to be challenges. No system's ever going to be perfect. No media or regulator is ever going to be completely unbiased. But there is an aspiration to have higher standards, and that aspiration is not being met, and insufficient is being done to address it by those various EU institutions. So all of us, whether it's you asking questions or us putting policy proposals, we all need to be encouraging that focus and that cross-cutting focus to ensure that influence both the countries that are already in the EU and most probably the ones where there can be the greatest influence, the accession countries where more can be done. I mean, I like the metaphor, the MTV show, and tarting people up, as it were, but actually this is more than that. This is something that really matters, and if you get it right as a country is aspiring to join, there's much more chance of it staying right in the future. Sorry, I do apologize, but I've got a train I need to catch to get to London. But
thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Maria Laura Franciosi has asked for the floor.
Thank you very much. I just very little observation. Even if you create standards and regulations from European Union and people don't respect these regulations, that it doesn't really affect. I mean, you don't have freedom of the press in that way. I remember before Bulgaria and Romania joined, we went with a group of journalists to interview several people in Bulgaria, and we were received by Stanishev, and Stanishev spoke for an hour, without saying much. And then at the end, somebody asked about, what Romania had done. It seemed to be doing better than Bulgaria, you will remember. And then Stanishev came out with this incredible sentence saying, "Please do not humiliate us," which was quite interesting, because what does he mean? What did he mean? He meant to say that, don't say what happens. I mean, I was kind of advocating, repressing freedom of the press. And this is interesting also what Andrea mentioned about the role of Berlusconi in the Balkans. I mean, when Berlusconi put a television in Albania, the other television channels more or less had to close, because the Berlusconi people were paying so much that all the journalists were rushing to this other. And I mean, there was a competition, which was, it didn't really, it couldn't really last. So I think what you need is really educating people to what is the really the freedom of the press. If we went to Bulgaria to the court, and we saw these posters showing a hand with a bag of coins and another hand grabbing it, and then the sign of forbidden. So it's forbidden to give money to the, I mean, this, and Bulgaria was going to join the EU in a few months' time. So this is it. You need you don't need to speak about freedom of the press. You need to tell people what it means to have a free press, and then they will realize, and the journalists are not forced to choose another job because they don't find jobs.
Maria Laura, these are memories from 15 years ago, but if you go today in Sofia, in the biggest hotel, you will see a sign which shows a gun and a bar.
I know, but this is just
which speaks for itself. Which speaks for itself, because there is too much mafia.
Anyway, I mean, this is it.
Yes, you have the floor, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Andy Vermoot. I'm from the International Alliance for the Defense of Rights and Freedoms. So I actually support this conference. I had one critical question regarding what I've heard, but first I wanted to ask some extra information regarding the Serbian lady who said linking the machine supported by proxy organizations. Can you give me some concrete examples? And also these concrete examples of political parties running television. So it's really something that catches my eyes. I think we need in Europe some legislation to free the media of this influence. And I had my last question is regarding this. Someone said European funds go to pro-government media. Okay. Are we not evolving in a sort of new censorship if we don't? If we say only against government media can get funding? Are we not evolving in a sort of ending of this multidimensional views? Doesn't media has to be free? Is it? Could it be only a guideline to say only pro-government, but to find a sort of balance between the two?
Can I ask you? Do you have a copy of the report? You have it. Okay, because some of the answers are in the report.
Yes,
but Tamara, I think.
Yeah, I can answer.
Received it now.
Yeah. I said that we had parties in the privatization of the media, and the people who are close to the ruling party, they bought the media which was state-owned or at the local level owned by the municipality. So we had, for example, one guy, Radojica Milosavljević, he bought, I think, 8 to 10 media, small media, regional media TV station. And he is connected with the ruling party. And also we had, for example, or we have, I forgot the name of the guy. He was the twins from the SNS. SNS is the ruling party, Alexander Vučić party. His brother was the main guy in Niš, that is city in the central, in the South Serbia. He was some kind of secretary of the Serbian Progressive Party, and he bought 2 TV stations with national frequency. So he is own. So the connections are very clear. It's not. It is not needed to do some hard investigative work for that.
Yes. Anything else that needs to be, because really in the reports.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
Peter.
I'll
Yeah.
say something about to the last question. I think if your question is about grants being given to chosen medium, that's an extremely difficult situation. I think you're absolutely right to highlight it, and that some kind of independent oversight would have to take place, not just to decide, who is the chosen outlet or which qualify for the support, but then there's also the distortions that would, just by giving money, also can impact on markets themselves. So there may be, for example, a commercial or semi-commercial independent media outlet at the same time, and suddenly by building up one other organization, that would impact on the other one. So I think there are international efforts at the moment to try and introduce this kind of system for pooling media development money, and then an international oversight board deciding who would get it. I have certain skepticism about it myself, but it's well intentioned, but I find some difficulties in the practical implementation of it. Or the others, I wasn't quite sure whether you meant that or whether you were talking about, the allocation of advertising, for example, state advertising, which in many cases is the state is the largest advertiser in a country in lots of situations, and there are internationally agreed rules, if you like, about how to decide which organizations get it, generally based on reach. So I think that's something that, okay, a state-aligned media will profit from censorship, from advertising budgets, but that's only right if the advertiser, the state in this case, is trying to get its message out. But it would also mean that non-state media would also receive some of those state dollars, and so there are mechanisms in place, but just they're not followed in all cases.
Actually, what happens with the EU money? The European Union in every country has to advertise all its programs, all its tenders, and everything, and that's a lot of money. And usually, it's the respective government who decides how to distribute this money. And you can imagine that it goes to friendly media. And I think more or less the same brought down Kurz, but okay, we are not discussing Austria today. I think that one day when Balkan Free Media Initiative will grow bigger, we'll discuss other countries as well. We mentioned already Romania. I think we can add important countries, and why not also Austria? But if there are no other questions, I will just invite you for kind of final words, and then we'll. Sorry for those online, but we'll have a glass of wine.
It will be very quick, as we have to read the. Oh, sorry. I have to build the microphone. I am really happy that there was attention paid to this argument. I know it's boring to talk about how the practices are applicated into the country, in Bulgaria and North Macedonia, into countries, but this is looking at this system and structure of this money and political power influence. It's crucial to understand how the media environment is deteriorated, especially in the Balkans. So the report is long enough. They're in detail, all these cases, well examined, we hope so. And thank you for your attention to the people online. Tamara would like to say something?
Yeah, regarding Serbia, what I can say, as I said, we are in the process of drafting the new laws, and I hope that there will be real political will to solve those problems which was mentioned in this report and many other reports. But I am not sure that they have real political will. I am afraid that that is also one more checking the box. on the way to the EU.
Final words,
Please, EU.
Peter.
I'd love to finish with something particularly optimistic, but unfortunately, I think I could just echo what Tamara was saying there about the. It's so desperately seems so desperately unfair that that so many countries in the region look to the EU as being almost their only salvation in terms of media freedom, because there aren't either the institutions or the ability locally for people to actually, insist that the press freedom and the freedom of expression is observed. And in many cases, people do just look to the European Union, and it's a question of political will and balances and priorities for the EU.
Mm-hmm. Andrea, final words? No final words. Okay. 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 My final words is it was a pleasure to moderate this discussion. They say that if you have something to say it at the Brussels Press Club. So I think we are the right place. And if you want to read a journalistic paper about this event, read Euractiv. It will be online tomorrow. And today you can read the article by Antoinette, which frames very well our discussion. Yes. I'm sorry, Naser. Please, the last words from you.
It's I think in the report it's good pointed that if we really want to improve the situation in Western Balkan countries, we need to deal with public money on media, policy of impunity, and reform on PBS. I think those are three main points if we want to improve something. And finally, please, I think North Macedonia will not have a good success in this path if we don't start negotiation. Out of the Euro integration process, the media situation in Macedonia will worsening more. I think out of this path, we are going to strengthen this kind of authoritarian behavior of governing in North Macedonia.
Thank you, Naser. And good luck. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. And yes, I think there will be some glasses in the short term. Thank you.